fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make?
Columbia University students meet your new foreign policy teacher. I wish this was a joke, but it's not. The course is titled Inside the Situation Room. The university even released this cringy promotional video to celebrate, but be warned, it's really hard to watch.
Oh my God.
What is it?
It's Hillary Clinton. She's running.
What?
What? Hillary's running again?
I know, I heard that's so crazy. This is wild. She's running again.
Here I am.
Hillary, you're running again.
Well, I sure am, Karen. I just got here early for the new class we're teaching together on foreign policy decision making.
Classes don't start until September.
Yeah, but I wanted to be prepared, Karen. You know, when it comes to crisis situations, you've always got to be prepared.
Prepared? I think you're more prepared than anyone to teach this course. Now, what are we going to call it?
Inside the Situation Room.
Yes. And I'll cover the theory of political decision-making and strategy.
And I'll cover what it was actually like in the room during the bin Laden raid, the Iran sanctions, the Gaza ceasefire, you name it.
Okay, but are you ready for whatever questions the students throw at you?
Bring it on. Now, if you'll excuse me, Karen, I've got to run.
You heard the secretary. If you get inside the Situation Room, come prepared.
This course is an obvious opportunity for Hillary to rewrite her own track record, to justify regime change, to buttress the neoliberal worldview, and to promote military interventionism as a moral crusade for the next generation of American leaders, left and right. Joining us now to discuss is author and radio host Scott Horton, the director of the Libertarian Institute. Scott, thanks for being here tonight.
Happy to be here, Kara. Thank you.
Grace, I know Hillary probably has a lot more foreign policy experience than pretty much anyone else. You heard it in the cringy promotional ad, but that doesn't mean that her experience is good experience or that it should be replicated and taught at university. What's your reaction to this clip we watched?
Well, first of all, I'm predicting utter disaster for the class itself. You know, this is a lady who, remember, she tried to do a book tour in 2014 after she had left her Secretary of State job, and nobody showed up. And then she insisted on running for president anyway, and then she lost. And, you know, she's had a very hard time understanding how much people absolutely hate her and how, you know, open and obvious her public record is. It's not just critics like me, but it's pretty much everybody knows all of the horror shows that she's been involved in, you know, from Serbia in 1999, where she forced Bill Clinton to do that war. You know, Gail Sheehy reported she wouldn't talk to him after the Monica Lewinsky scandal for 9 months until she called him to berate him that he had to bomb Serbia to break off Kosovo. And, you know, then she ran for Senate and supported every bit of the terror war as a senator. And then under Barack Obama as Secretary of State, she, you know, actually really helped the militarists force him into the Afghan surge. When she was the Secretary of State, she was supposed to be saying we should, you know, at least argue the diplomatic position. Instead, she said, I think you better do what they say, Mr. President, you know, and left him high and dry there. And then, of course, famously, she mongered the 9-month regime change war in Libya and also in Syria. Both of those things go together. And, you know, the best story on Benghazi is The Red Line and the Rat Line by Seymour Hersh, where he explains that it was Hillary, Leon Panetta, and David Petraeus, then the director of the CIA, who spearheaded the mission to take all the weapons and the terrorists that they had backed in Libya and funnel them on to the next jihad in Syria. And I document all of this in my book, Enough Already. That's not just a plug, but people can find it. And goes to show, you know, this is how she left her Secretary of State job, was knowingly backing terrorists in Syria. In fact, the president's current national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, who's probably really running the White House right now, he was Hillary's right-hand man and famously wrote to her in January or early February of 2012, hey, look, AQ, that is Al-Qaeda, they're on our side in Syria. and with a note about how Ayman al-Zawahiri, the leader of al-Qaeda, had endorsed the revolution in Syria, the same revolution America was supporting there. And she later, just a few days later, in fact, on CBS, invoked that as a reason to not intervene. But then what'd she do? She spent the rest of that year demanding that Obama intervene and pushing him, pressuring him to spend more money and authorize this covert mission that the CIA, worked with the Turks and the Saudis and the Israelis to pour billions of dollars in to support the jihad in Syria that ended up, as people remember, led to the rise of the Islamic State Caliphate in 2013 and 14, and then necessitated Iraq War III to destroy again. That was her brainchild. That's her, and she wants to show up in class and say, all right, kids, anybody have any questions about my foreign policy career? I think they'll have a few.
I think so as well. But it really does bother me how all this becomes orthodox. It's the idea of failing upward, but then it gets cemented as this is the unassailable orthodoxy, and don't you dare, criticize it, critique it. You're just to open your mind as a student, take it all in, and then you go off to your job in DC and you do the exact same thing. From your show and from some others, I've been following now Bill Bupert, and he's talked a lot about, for example, counterinsurgency, something I grew up hearing and something for decades our government and others have been pushing, and all it has is created failure after failure, loss of life on a massive scale, and yet you can't speak against it, or else you're kind of pigeonholed as being a little kind of kooky, a little out there. And as you're talking about Syria, those bad fruits are still being felt. Unfortunately, it's still being born. So in Syria, of course, the big news now: U.S. contractor being killed. I think some other U.S. service members injured. So in retaliation, the U.S. government, we issued some strikes in Syria against Iranian targets there. And many people are asking, why are we even still in Syria to have anyone be injured in the first place? And so before I get your reaction to this, to kind of see Hillary Clinton, like I said, like her tentacles still out there, I want to read for you a little bit from Dan Caldwell from the Center for Renewing America, because as you're talking about some of those, deep, complex webs of, this group and that group and how everything gets so messy over there, he writes, "This is how insane our presence is in Iraq/Syria. The Iranian-backed militias that killed an American, in which the U.S. are bombing in Syria, are allied with and supported by the Iraqi army, which is trained by U.S. troops and funded by U.S. taxpayers." So, everything is so crazy over there, and yet we're still in Syria.
Yep, that's absolutely right. And look, the bottom line of this, people can follow the through thread. It's really pretty easy. When W. Bush invaded Iraq 20 years ago this week, what he really did was he picked up right where his father left off, when his father had encouraged but then betrayed and abandoned the Shiite uprising after the first Iraq War in 1991. Well, W. Bush, the son, came and he took the Shiite revolution all the way to Baghdad. And in fact, he fought an 8-year civil war for the Shiite side. And what we now call the Iraqi army was based on the Badr Brigade of the Supreme Islamic Council that had lived in Iran for 20 years. And W. Bush was just a sucker of the Ayatollahs. He thought he was benefiting Israel, but he was benefiting Iran instead. And so, Kara, that's why they were so intent on trying to get rid of Assad in Syria, was to make up for the fact that they had given Baghdad to the Shiites. Well, now we've got to take Damascus away from them. We put them up 2 pegs, we can take them down at least 1. And so that was why they backed the jihadists there from 2011 through, well, really all the way through in Syria through 2017. Trump finally shut the thing down in the summer of 17. But in the spring of 13, the terrorists seized all of eastern Syria and called it the Islamic State. And then 1 year later, they rolled in famously. Everybody's seen the picture of the giant convoy of Toyota pickup trucks as the Islamic State fighters rolled from Syria into Mosul, Iraq. And they conquered all of western Sunni Iraq. So that wasn't supposed to happen that way. So now Obama had to launch Iraq War III, where he again lined America up with the Shiite side in Iraq in order to destroy this bin Ladenite caliphate that he had built in order to spite the Shiites for America being mad at them for George Bush fighting a war for them just a few years before. And so then we still have, the second part of that Iraq War III, of course, was in eastern Syria, where they finally helped the Kurdish forces there instead of the Shiites, because they still hate the Shiites in Syria. So they helped the Kurdish forces there to finally roust the Islamic State out of Raqqa and their major strongholds there. And now their excuse is that they have to stay to fight ISIS and Iran. But Iran is only there to help Syria fight ISIS. And if America got out of the way, there's no problem there. ISIS only got strong with all of Barack Obama and Benjamin Netanyahu and King bin Salman's support in the first place, and Erdogan, Recep Erdogan in Turkey. Without that support, they don't stand a chance against Syria and their allies there. So it's a hollow excuse that they're there to fight ISIS. And then as you're reporting here, the story is that an Iranian drone, we don't know really so far who really was flying it, I believe killed a contractor and wounded some American servicemen and another contractor there. And then they retaliated against an Iranian base in the country there. And they would have the American people believe that Iran and Hezbollah and Syria are on the side of these Sunni jihadist terrorists. But that's not right. They're the ones defending themselves from those terrorists that America has backed against them since 2011, at least off and on. So we really should just get out of there right now. We are really, literally right now there in the name of protecting our Kurdish allies from our Turkish allies. Surely we can strike a bargain between these two factions. The Turks have their concerns with the Syrian Kurds, but clearly that problem can be solved. And instead, and they've admitted this from time to time, Kara, their real agenda is to continue to occupy eastern Syria, and primarily the oil fields and the wheat fields, to keep the food and the oil revenue out of the hands of the state and its allies to, as they put it, enhance the effect of the sanctions. Because even after their terrorist war against this country failed, they're still waging really, the second most powerful war of all after the DOD, or third after CIA, is the U.S. Treasury Department, is waging a massive, embargo against them, trying to destroy their country. And even when the massive earthquake, did you read this? 50,000 people were killed in the earthquake, mostly in Turkey, but also in Syria. It must have been, more than 5 or, somewhere around 10,000 of them in Syria were killed. And so here's where the entire world should be coming together to help these poor people. And instead, America is just cracking down, just like our government would portray any government acting this way as the world's worst villains. But that's how America is. And we, and our Israeli allies bomb the airport where all the earthquake aid is arriving, and slowing down, deliveries of earthquake aid. So the policy is just completely out of control. And by the way, Donald Trump tried literally 3 different times in 2017, 18, and 20 at the end of his presidency to order American troops out of Syria. And he was just outright overruled by his own Pentagon every time. And he did give in to them, but they sure pushed him absolutely as hard as could be. Because they failed, and so they can't face up to the consequences of their failure,
You're exactly right, and it's the same thing, the Hillary Clinton, her ilk, so many others, Sullivan, and again, like you said, so many others, they kick up dust clouds all over the world, and then when everything falls apart, they go, see, this is why we need to intervene. It's like, well, wait a second, you're a big part as to why it's happening in the first place, so then to say that we need more of us there, that's only going to make things worse. But of course, that's what she's going to sell, those students at Columbia University. I mean, they're hearing that anyways, unfortunately. That's kind of the way we've operated. It's just like the way we do things domestically to our domestic politics. Government creates a problem and then sells themselves as the solution to your problem, and then it keeps devolving from there, and we're stuck in this crazy cycle. So foreign and domestic, it ends up being the same crazy loop that we're on. But Scott, as always, you're a wealth of knowledge. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks so much. The GIs in Vietnam called it the self-licking ice cream cone.
That's
exactly what it is.
That's exactly what it is.